King Luther threw the sacred sword he was holding into the air, then dropped down onto one knee and let it pierce straight through his spine as it landed. The monster lunged toward King Luther to snatch away the sword, but in the very next moment King Luther's body began turning into stone. It felt as if his weight had suddenly increased 1,000 times over. Eventually, King Luther shattered the wooden bridge beneath him and sank deep into the lake. In the ancient Middle Earth, humans and magicians had lived together peacefully for thousands of years, but everything changed when a dark wizard murdered the king of the magicians. The dark wizard carried the magical staff to the tower and unleashed the dark power sealed inside it, gaining immeasurable strength. Fortunately, the wizard Merlin stole that staff and reforged it into Excalibur, the sword of the king. Sometime later, the dark wizard attacked the royal city with an army of terrifying monsters. His dark powers brought down the massive walls within moments. The soldiers, trapped inside their weak human bodies, were unable to stand against those gigantic giants. Just as the wizard was about to destroy the city completely, King Luther picked up Excalibur and stepped forward alone to fight him. The moment King Luther gripped the sword with both hands, blue flames began glowing along its blade. The wizard's horrifying dark power shattered the instant it touched the sword. As soon as the dark wizard was killed, all of his monsters collapsed unconscious and fell down from the cliffs. In this way, a massive catastrophe was prevented. King Luther's reputation reached its peak, but he had no idea that the wizard had an ally as well, his own brother, Vortigern. To claim the throne, Vortigern made a deal with the devil. He gained unimaginable power, but the price he had to pay was the sacrifice of the person he loved the most. Vortigern took his wife to the edge of the lake and killed her with a dagger. At the same time, King Luther had also sensed the danger, so he tried to escape with his wife and son. But just as the three of them were about to flee for their lives, the queen suddenly collapsed and died right there. At that very moment, a monster engulfed in flames appeared before them, riding a horrifying beast. To protect his son, King Luther raised Excalibur once again, but he gradually began losing his strength. Eventually, even Excalibur slipped from his hands. Just then, his little son showed remarkable courage and picked up the sword to bring it back to King Luther. But while doing so, his hands were badly wounded with deep cuts. However, he still managed to escape safely from there. Luther's young son was shown escaping on a small boat after the destruction of his kingdom. A few kind-hearted women found the child drifting near London and took pity on him. They adopted him and brought him to an orphan house where he could survive safely, far away from the bloody war that had destroyed his family. The little boy had no memory of the royal life he once belonged to, and as time passed, he grew up without knowing that he was actually the true heir to the throne. On the other side, Luther's younger brother had taken control of the kingdom and declared himself king. The massive tower from which the powerful magicians once drew their energy was being rebuilt under his orders. He desperately wanted to gain the same magical power that his brother once possessed. Even though he was not a magician himself, he had spent much of his youth around sorcerers and dark magic users. Because of this, he had learned many secrets about magic and power. Over the next 20 years, he slowly transformed into a ruthless and evil ruler whose greed for power knew no limits. Meanwhile, Luther's son Arthur had grown into a clever and street-smart young man. Since he had spent his entire childhood among thieves, robbers, and criminals, he had learned how to survive in the harsh streets of London. Arthur was intelligent, fearless, and very quick with his mind. Although he often became involved in illegal activities and scams, he also had a good heart and frequently helped poor and needy people whenever he could. The people around him respected him because he always protected those who were weaker than him. At the same time, the evil king's great tower had finally been completed. Near the king's castle, a strange event occurred when the nearby stream suddenly dried up. As the water disappeared, the king's soldiers and companions discovered a mysterious sword stabbed deep inside a human-shaped stone. The sword looked ancient and powerful, almost as if it carried magic within it. Many strong men tried to pull the sword out, but none of them succeeded. Even Luther's brother himself could not move it even slightly. Believing that someone special was destined to wield the sword, the king ordered thousands of people from across the kingdom to come and try pulling it out. One by one they failed. Around the same time, Arthur got involved in a violent fight in the streets. Soon after, the king's soldiers captured Arthur and his companions. They were forced onto a boat and taken directly to the royal castle without understanding the real reason behind it. Arthur still remembered nothing about his royal bloodline. When the soldiers brought him before the magical sword, he quietly walked toward it without fear. The moment he touched the sword, strange visions from his forgotten past began flashing through his mind. He could suddenly feel an enormous power flowing through the weapon and into his body. Then, to everyone's shock, Arthur effortlessly pulled the sword out of the stone. However, the sword contained terrifying magical energy that Arthur could not yet control. The overwhelming power caused him to lose consciousness instantly. At that moment, everyone finally realized the truth. Arthur was the lost son of King Luther and the true heir to the throne. The soldiers immediately threw Arthur into prison. Since he was the rightful king by blood, the castle, the kingdom, and its people all truly belonged to him. The magical sword he had pulled from the stone was proof of his identity and destiny. News of Arthur's return spread rapidly across the land, and the people became filled with hope and excitement. Many of them hated Luther's cruel brother and believed that the Real King had finally returned to save them. Soon after, a mysterious woman appeared who was revealed to be a powerful mage. Meanwhile, Luther's evil brother visited Arthur inside the prison cell. He planned to humiliate Arthur in front of the entire kingdom. The king warned Arthur that if he tried to claim the throne or use the sword's power, all of his friends and companions would be executed. He ordered Arthur to stand before the public and admit that he was unfit to become king and unable to control the magical sword. A huge crowd gathered to witness the event. The people were excited and hopeful to finally see their true king. Arthur was ordered to lift the sword and demonstrate its power before everyone, but because he feared for the lives of his friends, he refused to fight back or reveal his abilities. Enraged by Arthur's silence, Luther's brother commanded his soldiers to execute him immediately. Just then, the mysterious mage suddenly appeared and unleashed her incredible magic. Using her powers, she controlled the surrounding animals and turned them against the king's army. Chaos erupted everywhere as the animals attacked the soldiers. During the confusion, Arthur's companions managed to free him from captivity. Arthur grabbed the magical sword, and together they escaped by jumping into the nearby stream. As they fled from the castle, Arthur held the sword once more. The immense magical energy surged through his body again, and the power became too overwhelming for him to handle. Within moments, he collapsed and fainted once again while the others desperately tried to carry him to safety. The mysterious mage used her magical powers on the sword and soon discovered that Arthur had completely forgotten his past. She realized that the hidden memories inside him could only be awakened in a very dangerous place filled with dark energy and ancient magic. Because of this, she decided to send Arthur into a shadow realm where he could finally uncover the truth about his past and his destiny. The place was terrifying. It was said that neither humans nor magicians could survive there for long. The land was filled with horrifying creatures, giant monsters, and deadly shadows waiting to kill anyone who entered. Arthur had no choice but to fight his way through them. Despite the danger, he continued moving forward bravely, battling every creature that came in his path until he finally reached an ancient tower standing deep within the darkness. The moment Arthur arrived near the tower, the magical sword suddenly began glowing brightly. Strange visions started flashing before his eyes, and at last he remembered everything about his past. He saw the final battle of his father, King Luther, against the terrifying demon knight. Luther had been losing the fight and knew he could not survive much longer. In his final attempt to save the kingdom and his son, he threw the magical sword into the air. As the sword came falling down, Luther placed himself beneath it, allowing the sword to strike through the magician connected to the tower's dark power. At that moment, King Luther sacrificed himself. His body slowly turned into stone and fell into the water beneath him. After learning the truth about his father's sacrifice, Arthur began training himself to properly use the magical sword. Although he still was not a perfect swordsman, he slowly started understanding its power. Later, Arthur and his companions met another powerful family in Britain. They possessed a huge army, countless weapons, and great influence across the land. Arthur cleverly convinced them that he was finally ready to become king and fight for the kingdom. After hearing the truth, they accepted Arthur as the rightful ruler and joined his cause. Their new mission was to stop the tower from being completed. Some of Arthur's companions secretly boarded ships carrying the tower's construction materials. They destroyed the supplies and blocked the transportation routes. Soon after, they attacked the city and set Luther's brother's castle on fire. Arthur then created a plan to assassinate his uncle. However, Luther's brother had already predicted Arthur's attack. Knowing Arthur would come for him, he sent another man who looked similar to him onto the ship as bait. During the chaos, one of Arthur's allies prepared to fire an arrow at the fake target. Arthur tried to stop him after realizing it was a trap, but the arrow had already been released. Instead of hitting Luther's brother, it killed his special commander. Panic spread everywhere. People began running in every direction while guards chased Arthur and brutally attacked the mage. Seeing this, Arthur finally unleashed the sword's power in anger. He grabbed the magical weapon and wiped out countless enemies with a single devastating strike. However, the battle came with a heavy price. Luther's brother captured one of Arthur's closest companions and killed him directly in front of Arthur. Heartbroken and filled with grief, Arthur took his remaining companions to safety on a boat. The death of his friend shattered him emotionally, and in frustration and sorrow, he threw the magical sword into the water. Suddenly, the Lady of the Lake appeared from beneath the water. She was a mystical fairy-like being who protected the sword. Holding the weapon in one hand, she grabbed Arthur and pulled him beneath the water. There, she showed him terrifying visions of the future. Arthur saw that if he failed to kill Luther's brother, the world would fall into darkness and destruction. Entire kingdoms would burn, and countless innocent people would die because of the sword's unchecked power. The Lady of the Lake told Arthur that he needed to trust both the mage and the sword itself. After warning him about the future, she returned the magical sword to him. Arthur awoke from the vision and soon encountered a group of men who informed him that many people throughout the kingdom now supported him. They wanted Arthur to become their true king. However, they also brought terrible news. The enemy army had captured Arthur's companions. A commander warned Arthur that although they still had him and the mage alive, the captives would all be executed if Arthur refused to surrender. After thinking carefully, Arthur decided to send the sword back to his uncle as a sign that he would surrender in a few days. Luther's brother became overconfident after receiving the sword. He believed Arthur was powerless without it and no longer posed a threat. Because of this false confidence, he released the mage. Before Arthur left, the mage secretly placed a protective spell on him. Soon after, Arthur traveled alone to his father's old castle to confront his uncle for the final time. Luther's brother prepared to kill Arthur using the magical sword itself. But this entire situation had been part of the mage's plan from the beginning. Using her magic, the mage controlled snakes and giant eagles. She sent a massive snake toward Luther's brother, forcing him to attack it with the sword in self-defense. During the attack, the sword became lodged deep inside a stone pillar, and only Arthur could remove it. At the same time, the mage summoned enormous snakes that attacked the castle from every side. Arthur's army also launched a massive assault on the fortress while chaos spread throughout the kingdom. Realizing that defeat was near, Luther's brother retreated into a hidden cave where he once again summoned the terrifying demon knight. Using dark magic, he transformed himself into a demonic creature far more powerful than before. Meanwhile, Arthur reclaimed the magical sword and charged into battle. The black-masked guards attacked him from every direction, but Arthur defeated them one by one using the sword's incredible power. The remaining soldiers eventually surrendered before him. Then the final battle began between Arthur and his demonic uncle. Luther's brother was extremely powerful and dominated Arthur during the fight, attacking him the same way he had once attacked King Luther. Arthur was eventually knocked down and nearly lost consciousness. At that moment, Luther's brother repeated the same words he had once spoken to Luther during their old battle. Hearing those words triggered Arthur's memories once again. Arthur finally understood the truth about the sword. "Perhaps the sword belongs to me," Arthur declared as he remembered his father's sacrifice. In that moment, Arthur realized that the sword could never be controlled through rage and hatred. To truly unlock its power, he needed to remain calm and focused. He had to master his anger instead of allowing it to master him. After understanding this lesson, Arthur finally gained complete control over the magical sword. The weapon began shining with immense light as Arthur entered the battle once again with renewed confidence and power. A brutal fight followed. Arthur was attacked repeatedly, and even his weapon suffered heavy damage during the struggle. But eventually, Arthur struck Luther's brother with the sword's full power. The dark magic vanished, and his uncle returned to his normal human form before dying at last. After defeating him, Arthur used the sword's power to completely destroy the magical tower forever. With the tower gone, peace finally returned to the kingdom. Everything slowly became normal again, and Arthur was finally crowned the true king. Standing before the people, he raised the legendary sword high into the air while the entire kingdom cheered with happiness and hope. And the kingdom was finally safe once again. Here the story came to an end.